What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Season 3 of the On the Water podcast. We're super excited to be back. I'm Anthony DeCicci. I got Kevin Blinkoff with me, Jimmy Fee. We've been hearing from a lot of you guys about when's this coming back, and we're back. So let's kick it off with kind of a little look back over the time that we've been not doing a podcast, and we'll give you a little preview of what's to come from On the Water going forward.
Yeah, this is kind of our show season. So it's the middle of winter right now, and this is when we go to the sportsman shows, and that's a great chance. It's always great to hear and talk to you guys at these shows, and we really appreciate all the feedback we've gotten on the podcast. A lot of you guys have come up to us, asked when it's coming back, and coming up this winter, the next two big shows we're going to be at are the Rhode Island Sport Fishing Anglers. Oh my God.
It's the RISA show. We got the RISA show coming up, the Rhode Island Saltwater Anglers Association. That's March 8th through 10th. And then follow that up with the New Jersey show, the Saltwater Show in Edison, New Jersey. And that is the 15th to the 17th.
And those are our two biggest, they're my two favorite shows of the year, because those are the saltwater based shows. And you see a lot of the captains that you talk to and see on Instagram all season. They're all there in one place, great seminars at them, and some good kind of last-minute tackle buys for the coming season as well.
Yeah, definitely by those shows being middle of March, you start to get like that first good weather day. You start to get real antsy. All of a sudden you get hit with that, like, I need to buy everything for this fishing season. I need more of everything. I need more lures. I need more reels. I got to get ready to go.
I think without fail at the Edison show, like it's in the middle of a technology park, but there's some reeds and I guess some sort of wetlands or swamp nearby. And you'll go out for a break, and it'll be warm, and you'll hear the spring peepers going, and it's like, all right, the season's here. And usually that time of year, the stripers are you're not too far from the Raritan Bay, so there's actually some early season fishing happening already then. Mm-hmm. So last year, we talked about this last year on the podcast. Matt Hefner, our assistant editor, and I went and tried to do that, and ran into some police activity for somebody discarded something they shouldn't have discarded. I was on the dock. We didn't catch any bass, but we came back with a story.
This episode of the On the Water podcast is sponsored by our friends at Old Town Canoe and Kayak. I love kayak fishing, and to be honest, there's no place in the world that I would rather be than fishing on my Old Town Big Water pedal kayak. I do all kinds of fishing on my Old Town. In early spring, I'm out on the small ponds fishing for largemouth bass and pickerel. By May, I'm out every morning at first light, gliding along in the harbors and salt ponds, throwing topwater lures at freshly arrived stripers. And then one thing I can't wait for is when the bluefish show up in spring on the sand flats here on Cape Cod. These fish tend to be pretty good sized, 8 to 10 pounders, and they come into just 3 to 4 feet of water, swimming right below the surface. In the Old Town Big Water, it's stable enough that I can stand up and spot them, and then I sight cast to them, I throw flies to them. The blues can be incredibly spooky, and I don't even know if there's another way that you could get so close to them and do that kind of fishing without being in a kayak. The Old Town Sportsman lineup includes paddle, pedal, and power-driven kayaks in a range of sizes and setups, including Old Town's newest kayak, the ePDL Plus. Whether you're new to kayak fishing and on your way to becoming completely addicted like I am, or you're already in love with kayak fishing and just looking for your next vessel, Old Town has a kayak that will fit your fishing. So one of the shows that I was at with Cheech was up in Marlborough, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Awesome show put on, which has gotten bigger in recent years, really popular show. I showed up for that to set that show up on Friday morning, and I was there a couple hours, maybe 2.5 hours before the show was supposed to open, and I had a panic attack, like, oh my God, I'm late. There was already a line out the door and around the building, and I thought the show's not opening for 2 hours.
They moved venues this year, and they wanted to kind of like figure that out, because people 2 years ago, the year that you and I went there on, kind of a swim bait hunt to get some coveted swim baits, which is a big draw, an element of that show. This year, they were at a new venue, and they didn't want people camping out in 10 degrees, 15 degrees for as much as 36 hours before the show to have the first crack at those coveted swim baits. So what they ended up doing is for, like $50 or something like that, they sold these VIP tickets that got you into the show first.
So explain to me that, because I was kind of taken aback. I'm like, I had no idea that there was this, I've heard you guys talk about swim baits. You've written about it. I read the article. I didn't know it was to the point where people are showing up for these shows, camping out, lining up early. When they opened those doors and these people came in, everybody rushed to a particular booth.
Yep. Swimbait Universe was the one this year because they had a lot of those like coveted builders baits all as part of their display.
So when you guys are talking about swim baits too, these are predominantly the largemouth bass swim baits.
Yep.
So you think of largemouth bass lures, typically 3 to 5 inches. These are baits that are more
and like 6 to 15, maybe $20 for a nice jerk bait.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
25 if you want to do the Vision 110, the Mega Bass Vision 110 at
Yeah.
the high end of it. But these swim baits are typically, I'd say 6 at the low end inches up to 10, 12 inches. Some of the soft plastics are truly mammoth, but they also command prices of, it's at the point where $100 almost feels like a steal for some of them. If you can get it, you try so hard to be able to buy a swim bait for this outlandish price because there is such little supply.
The swim baits I was looking at there, they were more than $100. There were quite a few that were,
$200, $300 is kind of, really what that upper end of the coveted ones sell for at retail. But then there's this whole secondary market. We don't have to get into that, but that can push things upwards of, $800, $900 for some of these really hard to get baits. And the thing that drives that, I think, is obviously it's supply and demand. And if you want this bait and you're willing to pay for it, you still can't get it unless you do something ridiculous like camp out for 36 hours to be first in line to grab one.
I didn't know they were doing, that sounds like the Disney Magic Pass where you cut
exactly.
the line. So there was a tiered ticket price where you could pay more to have a guaranteed entry first. That's kind of worth it, but it is, man.
It was interesting. And the crowd that came in early to get those swim baits, they all had on, everyone had on a sweatshirt advertising kind of their preferred swim bait company.
Saw a lot of Pat's sweatshirts. Saw some Lanciotti ones, Sherpa. Like everyone was kind of flying their flag. It's a great show to the point where being there the year before with a good deal of money to drop on swim baits, my hour and change commute was a audible conversation with myself about how I don't need to buy any swim baits. I'm not buying any swim baits. You don't need anything. And I convinced myself during that ride that I wasn't going to fall into that vicious cycle.
So if you want to learn more about the swim bait culture and in particular Cheech's addiction and his issues with spending
segue,
money on
Kev.
them, definitely pick up our new magazine, On the Water Bass. We should probably get that. We'll get that swim bait article online too, so you can check it out at onthewater.com. But On the Water Bass is a new magazine that we came out with. We sent it out to all of our subscribers in February, and we also made it available on newsstands and sent out to a bunch of folks who were interested, brought it to that show and handed it out. And Jimmy, why don't you kind of explain what the idea was behind creating this On the Water Bass magazine?
So we've talked about creating a bass-only magazine for a couple years because internally, a lot of us love to largemouth bass fish. A lot of us got started. Kevin, I know you grew up far from the ocean, from saltwater, so freshwater was that's your introduction to fishing. I grew up in Philadelphia. Cheech grew up on a peninsula surrounded by saltwater, so he didn't have this kind of problem, but he also loves largemouth bass fishing. The one question we had was, would a Northeast-specific bass magazine, is that something anybody wants? I mean, it's something that I want because I subscribe to Bassmaster, I subscribe to End Fisherman, and there was great articles in there, always stuff I enjoyed, but it was never quite right for southeastern Pennsylvania where I was bass fishing. You'd see the main hot spots, but you never saw Union Lake in New Jersey, which is one of the places that I fished. So we thought about creating a Northeast, basically taking what we've done with saltwater fishing in the Northeast and doing that only for bass fishing in a magazine. And, as we floated the idea out, not only to, potential advertisers and partners who were really interested in it, but then to our readers and saying, what do you guys think about this? Some of the serious bass fishermen, here in New England, down in New Jersey. And people said, yeah, that'd be really cool. We'd love to see something like that. And finally, we did it. We put out an extra magazine this year that came out in February devoted to Northeast bass fishing. And it was really fun to put together. It's a little bit of a different feel than most on the water magazines. So it's a little bit. We don't have all the usual columns. We didn't have a recipe column because I don't know. I don't want to be eating largemouth bass. The one thing that'll keep me from this is kind of a sidetrack, but years ago, Field and Stream put out a video on how to fillet a largemouth bass, and if you look really closely as they do it, like a giant red worm pops out of the fillet, and I think that cured any desire I'd ever have on eating a largemouth bass. So no recipes in this issue, but we interviewed a lot of Northeast bass pros from each state, got their rundown on, tell us how you fish your local waters. What's your go-to on that one? And
so in that way, similar formula to what we've always done with On the Water of saying, fishing is kind of regional, it's local, and telling the story of bass fishing really for the Northeast, for those anglers from Virginia north to Maine is kind of where we set our boundaries and saying, who are the professionals who are actually fishing pro bass tournaments, and who are the anglers who are kind of making a name for themselves, whether it's on social media or just locally that they're becoming known, and telling their stories and highlighting specific fisheries. So we talk about some of the smallmouth bass fishery in Maine. I think it was the Penobscot River.
Yep.
Yes, by Ryan Lilly. That was a really cool piece.
And then just some other, so some of these specific locations and what the fisheries are, and then some anglers and how they approach those bodies of water as well. And, a lot of bass, it's the same species across the country, across the world. It's so popular, but there are some specific ways that people fish for them here, and they are different scenarios here as well. And so providing that content and celebrating that community too. And that was one of the big things that we heard when we talked to people. And we, give a shout out to Robbie Tartaglia, who came on board working with us, who is a big fan of freshwater bass fishing, who does some guiding, who has a Ranger boat and has been going out there and doing a lot of bass fishing. He came on board and kind of was very excited and said, hey, this community is huge, it's passionate, showing us some of these Facebook groups. He fishes a lot of the weekend tournaments, and it is a lot of anglers who they just live, breathe, and die by largemouth bass fishing, and they were excited to see their community celebrated. Here's something for you.
Yeah, Robbie's the type where he follows professional bass fishing the way that some people follow sports. I mean, he is that into it. He knows all the players. He knows what's happening in the tournaments, and not just with a and he has kind of like that hometown bias where he roots for the guys out in the Northeast.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think that it was pretty evident early on that the community was abuzz with that we were doing this, which was awesome. It made us feel like we made the right decision. And then when it actually came out at that show, the feedback was awesome. I've heard from, partners all across the country that we work with, some of them that participated in this launch and some of them that didn't, that said I've never seen anything like that in that bass space. It's unique. It has On the Water's DNA, and you guys knocked it out of the park with that. So it felt really good to do that and know that you were doing it to celebrate this, thriving, passionate community, kind of focused on a different area that isn't kind of traditional on the water, striped bass, tuna, saltwater stuff. And I'm excited to see it kind of blossom into what On the Water has always been, but those elements aimed at bass. So it's not just a once a year bass almanac. It's going to kind of be, year-long coverage through the YouTube content that we create, through the social stuff, online, the emails, like everything that that you've known us to do on the Water media side of things will now have an element of that aimed at bass, which is super exciting to kind of give it some legs for regular coverage all year.
Yeah, and as Kevin and I were talking about the story list, what kind of mix we wanted to put in this issue, one of the things we were thinking about is what's the type of story we wanted to have some elements of, like that technical how-to, but also what were the stories that Bassmaster wouldn't print, that has the roots in the Northeast, but something like the history of largemouth bass in New England. And we told the story about how there was one guy who was instrumental in introducing these fish first in Maine and then throughout all of New England, and the appeal of largemouth bass fishing in the country as a whole. Another one I wrote on getting swim baits, on what you have to, not just fishing swim baits. There's not too much info on how to do it, but if you were going to try to get one, all the the beg, borrow, and steal that you have to do to actually get one of those baits, like we were talking about from the show earlier. So it was a lot of fun. We're going to be putting out more bass fishing content on our YouTube channel. There's not going to be any less saltwater content. Still plenty of that, plenty of striped bass, tuna, fluke, all the favorites, but now a little bit more for the freshwater guys as well. And also we started a whole new Instagram account, On the Water Bass. We'll throw the link to that in the show description here, and that's going to be, a daily, multiple times a week check-in on what's happening bass fishing wise in the Northeast.
So basically, you got this magazine that right now is once a year, covering kind of the full year. Then you have the digital properties on Instagram and Facebook. There's a section on the website dedicated to bass that will be its own digital portal for that content to live. And then there's, a separate kind of newsletter that will kind of keep you in the loop on the Northeast bass scene, pretty regularly through your email. So really excited about the feedback that we've gotten. And, the goal was to give a voice to the Northeast bass angler, which, if that continues to go that way and we succeed in doing that, it's pretty cool to be able to do something for that community.
Absolutely. And I want to just correct myself earlier. I said I think Robbie has a Ranger. He's got a red tracker.
He's got a tracker.
Yeah. So if you're out on Peters Pond, I know he's there a lot, or any of the other ponds on Cape Cod, and you see a red tracker, that's probably Robbie. So definitely go
mug him, because he's a stick on the bass fishing side of things for sure. The people at Z-Man Fishing have been dedicated to ignoring the book on traditional lure making, instead setting out to create truly category-defining lures, soft baits, and jig systems that simply catch fish. At Z-Man, authentic innovation remains a badge of honor, recognized and admired by countless fans worldwide. I'm one of those fans. I've fished countless Z-Man products in both fresh and salt, from their chatterbaits to their soft plastics made from a material they call Elastec. Some of the most naturally acting, durable soft baits I've ever fished. I've caught PBs on their smallest baits, like on a massive brown trout, choked a micro finesse TRD while targeting smallies, to hooking giant tarpon and redfish on their diesel minnows, which are also phenomenal striper baits. The best part is, when bluefish show up, they'll hold up to them too. Give them a look at zmanfishing.com or ask for them at your local shop.
Keeping things on largemouth bass, one of my winter travels this year was down to Houston, and it wasn't necessarily a fishing trip as much as it was it was called the Berkeley Science Symposium. And this was, a lot of times big companies will throw these press events, and sometimes they're centered around fishing, sometimes it's something else. This was more about talking about the future of fishing and technology. One of the big things happening in the bass world right now is the electronics technology has gotten so refined and so effective that it feels like everyone's trying to catch up. How do we want to regulate this in tournaments? Is this actually a good thing? And then on the other side, like, how do we make baits and
Specifically
for this? So that technology is the forward-facing sonar. So if you're not familiar with bass fishing, if you don't follow it too much, basically it's like this. If you know side scan sonar from saltwater, this is looking forward from your boat. They attach it to the trolling motor, the transducer, and it's a live look at what's happening in front of you. You can see the fish swimming, what direction it's swimming, to the point where you can say, okay, I'm going to target that fish right there, 20 feet in front of the boat, and you have to cast. You can cast at that fish, then see how your lure moves, and not only are you identifying the fish you want to see, you see how they're reacting to the lure. So that was the one thing Berkeley wanted to show their 3 baits they made to be optimized to fish with forward-facing sonar, and the key to them was baits that you could adjust the retrieve midstream to how a fish was reacting to your bait. So previously, if you're fishing blind and you don't know how a fish could be there waiting for you to mix things up. Maybe it's not interested, but if you twitch the bait or let it fall. Fishing from shore for my kayak, like I always do often do for bass, I'm guessing. I'm incorporating pauses kind of at random. With this forward-facing sonar, you were dialed in. Okay, that fish, he backed off when I paused it, so I'm going to speed it up, and there you go. Oh, he bit.
Yeah.
So
you're sight fishing. You're basically sight fishing for fish you can't see. Now you can see fish, and so you can see how they're reacting. You can see where they are, and you can see how a change in your retrieve or the way you move a bait, how the fish react to that.
And it was really interesting. The 3 baits they put out are the Power Switch, which is a soft plastic straight tail bait. Picture a a swim shad, but no paddle tails. I have a straight tail on it, and that has a very erratic action. You can straight reel it in, you can twitch it, let it fall, lift and drop it. So a lot of ways you can work it. There is one they call the Kredge, which is jerk spelled backwards. So basically, jerk is in jerk bait, not jerk as in
As in jerk, yeah.
Yeah.
Jerk bait spelled backwards. Kredge.
and that is basically a jerkbait body with a lip flipped upside down. So what it does is it sinks. It has this kind of backward sink like the flying lure was always supposed to do. Mm-hmm. But when you pull it forward, it twitches and swims and then slides backwards into the face of a fish. So you can, if you have a fish following it and you pause it, it'll slide right back in their face, kind of force a reaction bite out of them. That was neat. The one I was most excited about was the finisher, and that, I believe the bait developers there said it was designed initially. They were looking for a northern style glide bait, which is kind of the overall term for like the Rapala jigging rap, that classic ice fishing bait where you're fishing it vertically and you're twitching it around and it glides and moves like that. They started to develop that, and then they saw how it looked on a horizontal presentation and thought, this bait would be perfect for forward-facing sonar and working with that. So they dialed that into that one, and you can still fish it through the ice. In fact, you're going ice fishing tomorrow. I should give you one of these.
Yeah, I'll check that out
to use it, because it's been a brutal ice winter locally.
Yeah. I mean, really, that technology has revolutionized everything with the sport, from the, how do we deal with this? How do we, handle it responsibly, to on the business side of things, it's created a new need for lures that work differently, that are specifically built for that. And the results have been amazing. I mean, Rapala was telling me that one of their new soft baits, the Mayor, had literally supplanted some of their hard baits that have been #1 in sales for, the company's history as soon as they came out. And that's how big of an impact it's had. So a lot of people are doing it. I've got buddies with forward-facing sonar. It's really cool, but there's some things that, it can change. Like my buddy right now, Kyle, who I do a lot of bass fishing with, since he's put it on his boat, he's like, I've lost my mojo. He's like overthinking it, and it's kind of like, he's feeling his way through it, but he's like, I feel like I can't catch fish anymore. And it's like, you can't change what's always worked for you. You got to use it as a tool that kind of, complements what's been successful.
So it opens up more possibilities. It shows more of a fishery in the lake that you didn't know exists. That's what I've heard from a lot of guys. So if you're used to bass fishing and you run down the bank and you're beating the bank throwing a spinner bait or a square bill crankbait, that's not going to be when you're using the forward-facing sonar. They use it to find these fish that are hanging offshore. Maybe they're suspended. Maybe they're on offshore structure chasing bait fish schools. So fish that would be a real needle in the haystack to find without this kind of technology. But that doesn't mean it's simple. I had the chance at the Science Symposium. We did get on a boat with, I was with Bass Pro Josh Bertrand, and he said, all right, man, go ahead, take the reins. He set me up on his trolling motor. He said, here's the rod. He goes, go ahead, cast into this. You've got a 10 or 15 degree cone that you need to land your lure into. And also, as you're operating the trolling motor at the front of the boat with a foot pedal, you can then move it to find the fish or find your lure. It was not easy for me to, one, hit that narrow target, and two, to the whole, I don't know how guys operate the bass boats with the trolling motor. That seems to take a lot of coordination.
Well, I mean, if you've been doing that, it's the direction that the head of the trolling motor is pointed is the direction that your eyes or your transducer that's mounted on, basically where the propeller is pointing, and then you land your lure in it, and you literally can kind of see a little, like, almost looks like a splash, and then you get this, like, the same kind of color or mark of a fish would be, just slowly falling down, and you can control exactly the presentation that you're hoping to get that strike, and then react in real time to how that fish is responding to your lure. So,
but it's not as simple as it's. I guess my thought was, you slap this thing on the front of your bass boat, and boom, you're going to be catching more bass,
and your live well just fills up with fish. It's not quite that, and I don't think anybody wants that.
It takes some dialing in.
Yeah.
But if you were somebody who, like Robbie Tartaglia, watches a lot of bass fishing tournaments and bass fishing content, what I've heard, and this is something that Devin Acton, who puts out a weekly newsletter on Northeast fishing, tuna and bass fishing predominantly, with some striper fish too, called the Weekly Salvage. he said that for him as a consumer of the sport of tournament bass fishing, he goes, it's lessened his enjoyment of it a little bit because everybody's doing the same thing now, where they are looking at their screen, it's head down, looking at the screen, searching for fish with their electronics. Whereas before, there was a much more varied approach to it. I'm going to go flip cover. I'm going to go, beat the bank with spinner baits. He said now with everybody doing this, he said it's just not as exciting to watch bass fishing, but it probably plenty exciting to do. He said from a perspective of fishing for bass, I feel like this gives me a better chance of catching a big one.
Yeah, it allows you to eliminate dead water a lot more efficiently, which, you just spend more time with your bait in front of fish. But like you said, it's only for that kind of deeper water application. So you're still going to see it come full circle where the guys that are performing at the top of that game are able to kind of know when to kind of employ that, level of focus on that, or, scrap it and go beat the banks or
Now,
whatever.
Not everybody loves this for everything, this forward-facing sonar. One of the presenters at the down in Houston was a walleye fishing pro, and I went up to him afterwards because the first thing I thought was like, man, this must have revolutionized muskie fishing too. Must really chip a lot off the 10,000 casts that that traditionally you're supposed to need to catch a muskie. And this guy who was just up on stage talking about how much he loved it for walleye fishing said, I don't like it for muskies. He goes, I think it's ruined muskie fishing. He said, for one, it takes a lot of the mystique and allure of it out. And two, he said he thinks it's putting undue pressure on the fish. He said after the muskie spawn, they head offshore in these lakes and they'll kind of suspend. And the idea was they weren't really eating. You would catch one once in a while, but they thought there were a lot more muskies out there. So you were just catching that one that would bite. What he said with the forward-facing sonar, he discovered that there's not that many muskies, and now way more people are catching them at a time when they're in a pretty vulnerable state. And he said he could see that really negatively affecting the fishery. And people, what I sensed was a lot of like kind of a purist mentality toward muskie, which I feel like I have as a striped bass surf fisherman a little bit, where you kind of tend to like, okay, this is how it feels like it should be done. And then when you introduce something that makes it easier a little bit, it takes away some of the mystique or allure of it, resisting it.
Yeah. Anytime there's a new technology that is this revolutionary, there's going to be that sort of adjustment period where you're going to have some people who think this is the greatest thing ever. There's going to be some people who think that it is potentially ruining certain things. You'll probably see some regulations and rules that adjust for it. You'll probably see fishermen and anglers just kind of re-examining their ethics and trying to figure out how to use this technology in a way that is responsible. Yeah. But overall, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to watch.
It is. And the other side of that Houston trip was they gave a whole behind-the-scenes look at the Berkeley labs in Spirit Lake. So we had a whole presentation on that. And I didn't realize how involved they are in their bait design process. They have thousands of bass in tanks where they literally test their lures on them. And one thing that really stuck out, there was a lot of cool stuff I learned from that, but one on bass memory. So one of their tests they have in kind of like a racetrack, like of a tank, with a solid middle, but around the outside, and they have an arm where they can put a lure on it and have it run around the tank. So they put a hard bait, a lipless crankbait on there, and had it run around the tank for, I don't know how long they said it was for, but they said every bass in the tank pretty much went up and took a crack at this lure. And they said it took another 6 weeks before any of those fish took another shot at it. Wow. So those fish had a negative association with that lure, and it took that long for them they said the first fish was 6 weeks, and then for some, the extreme was 6 months.
That kind of confirms one of the, concepts that I think is important with bass, for targeting big bass in some of our ponds, is like show them something new. Like when you do that in the right package, it usually is the ticket to getting a big bite.
That is why, especially on those big lakes where they see a lot of tournaments, those fish see a lot of pressure. That's why there's always this arms race to the new lure, the new rig. Yep. When I first started bass fishing, like all I needed was a 7-inch power worm and on a Texas rig, and I caught plenty of bass, and that was the hot bait everybody was talking about. I feel like nobody ever talks about those anymore.
I'm convinced that, our swim bait missions have gotten progressively less fruitful. When we first started, we had the wrong gear. We had a couple okay baits. We were doing everything wrong and catching slobs, right? And then the next year it was like probably leveled up a little bit because we had the right gear and the really sought after baits that we like made a point to sell everything to get. And then by year 3, we're like, oh, we're so dialed in. We're going to catch an 8-pounder. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. But we're doing the same milk run to some of the, places we know hold big fish.
There's one bass I'm pretty sure I've caught 3 times.
Yeah,
just by the
but,
scars on his fins.
We're moving so many fewer fish per trip where it's like, this used to be automatic blow up central, and it was like it's only a matter of time till you catch the biggest fish in that pond, and then you move to the next one. So, for me personally, this year I want to focus on water that I've never swim bait fished, and I bet you the results will be there if there isn't other people throwing big wake baits and stuff in that pond. Then it's kind of a theory that I'm going to test. I think we've kind of trained these fish, and I don't know. We'll see if it pans out.
So that's the difference, I think, between guys like you and me and then a professional bass fisherman. We want to find the fish that aren't seeing anything.
Yeah.
We're looking for the dumb fish.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the professional bass fisherman has no choice on where he's fishing, so he needs to find the way to outsmart the smart fish, the educated fish.
Yeah, and they're the most, and typically those big tournaments are in the most pressured bodies of water that are famous for its bass fishing. So, they got to be constantly showing them something different to fool those fish over and over again, which is, it's not an easy skill. Family owned and operated for over 65 years, AFCO represents unparalleled quality, performance, and reliability when it counts most. From inventing the first roller guide to introducing the world's first pair of true fishing shorts, which are some of the most comfortable shorts you'll ever own, by the way, AFCO not only delivers products proven to perform on the water, but are true leaders of conservation as well. Their pledge to protect and conserve has 10% of your AFCO purchases going directly to supporting conservation initiatives. Beyond their fishing shorts, a couple of my personal favorites are their Barricade Elite bibs and jacket in their line of Reaper sweatshirts, pullovers, and jackets. Check them out at AFCO.com. AFCO, any fish, any water.
So what else is going on in the office? We just launched Striper Cup sales, so we're now selling your Striper Cup boxes. You can sign up for the tournament through our website. We got a new shirt design this year done by Andy Nabreski, Living Off the Land and Sea.
That came out awesome.
Anybody watching this on video, I just grabbed the shirt. You can check it out. You can also check it out online, but it's Andy's kind of pen and ink, and it's based on, if you look right above me here, it's based off a mount of a real big striper, and that's the idea of this big striper.
Not just a real big one. That's a replica of the world record.
Is that the world record?
I'm pretty sure.
Looks pretty big. And so that's what Andy kind of looked at and said, did a pen and ink drawing based on that mount. And that's the back of the Striper Cup shirt this year. So go sign up. Tournament itself starts May 1st. So you've got some time to start your fishing and start winning some prizes. But yeah, we're starting to see the prizes show up as well, which is pretty cool to see those start to fill up the basement here at the headquarters. And then we start to dole those out starting May 1st. Submit pictures of your fish, of your striped bass, and win prizes.
Yep,
pretty easy.
That easy. We just kicked off the new season. Was it season 22?
21.
21 of On the Water's Angling Adventures on our TV run on NBC Sports Boston. We had a lot of fun putting those together, and we're still rolling out new episodes. I think we're only, 3 new episodes out?
Yeah, so this year we've got 10 new episodes coming. So far, about half of them are on YouTube, and you can watch them. We did some striped bass fishing, tuna fishing, a couple tuna shoots, some freshwater as well. One of my favorites was Kevin going to Nantucket and catching a Grand Slam, which was a striped bass, bluefish, false albacore, and Atlantic bonito. And
I've taken a little heat for claiming Grand Slam when I stretched it out from over 2 days, technically. I mean, I caught some of the fish the night before and then fished the next morning.
I wasn't going to be a stickler about it.
So it was over a 24-hour period, but it was separated by a sleep. So some people are saying, no, that's not a true Grand Slam, which I'm fine with. It gives me something to shoot for next year. So I don't know. Leave it in the comments if you think that I don't deserve to have claimed the Grand Slam. That's fine.
These are all made up accomplishments anyway.
It's true.
In addition to the TV shows, we've also introduced 2 new series over the past 6 months. From the Surf, which is surf fishing from, so far we've done New Jersey up to the North Shore of Massachusetts. Kevin has a series, Kayak Fishing the Coast, where he goes and kayak fishes with some of the kayak fishing community from, so far the furthest south you've gone is Connecticut, but you've gone all the way up to Maine. And
we got more episodes of it coming out, making plans right now to do some more fishing. Hopefully soon get out and get the kayak fishing season started.
we are in the depths of the, just do any kind of fishing to make you happy. Cheech and I the other day went to the canal because there was a report of through the winter, guys will go out and catch sea herring on sabiki rigs, but they'll throw a diamond jig at the bottom as the weight on that sabiki rig, just in case there's something bigger. And this year, the just in case was working out. We heard reports of pollock up to the largest I heard. So pollock, Atlantic pollock, a relative of the cod family. They've got a forked tail. They're darker brown. They have a white lateral stripe, and they're more aggressive. They're more predatory. So whereas cod and haddock feed along the bottom, pollock are more like, their nickname is Boston bluefish. They suspend.
They're
They chase
schooling
down
fish,
bait fish.
they're aggressive.
I've seen videos from Norway where they will be on the surface blitzing like striped bass, eating topwater lures.
Is that what you saw when you got down to the canal?
No, it was not actually. But they said fish up to 32 inches. More reports said up to about 20 inches.
Yeah.
I would have been happy with a 12-incher, just anything. I'd like to catch a pollock from shore, but Cheech and I went down there, and it was beautiful for about 20 minutes. It was cold, and then we were in the east end of the canal at the bulkhead, which is where a lot of people do the sea herring fishing or the mackerel fishing in the winter, and you're in plain view of the Sagamore Bridge. And at one point, I look back, and the Sagamore Bridge was gone. It was just completely gray.
I'm like, wow, they did the bridge repairs pretty quickly.
And then it was like a steam engine coming down the canal, this squall, and all of a sudden we were in sideways snow pelting us. It dropped 15 degrees. It was miserable. Well, we stayed for another 15 minutes.
I thought that was going to turn the bite on.
And it was just the two of you?
No, I brought my 6-year-old son with me, who pretty much called me out for this being a ridiculous idea. There's no chance we're catching anything in this. And I was like, yeah, you're kind of right.
But I had an encounter with an old salt down there, a guy who pulled up next to me in his Jeep, rolled down the window and said, "You catching anything?" I said, "No, not yet. I'm hoping for some pollock." He goes, "I used to catch a bunch of them 30, 40 years ago." And then he kind of gave he did an assessment of I saw him look at my rig, look at my rod, and then goes, "But you must be going for big ones with that rig." And I was like, So I was using kind of striped bass teasers with a big metal jig. So I did, I've got some mackerel Christmas trees. I'm going to go down. I'm going to give it another shot. I'm going to keep going. But why I've kind of had I really want to get a pollock this year, a good one, because for the first time in I'd say maybe 10, 15 years, there's been a tremendous pollock bite that the headboats have been getting on. The Eastman's Fleet out of Seabrook, New Hampshire, and the American Classic out of Lynn, Massachusetts has been going out to Jeffrey's Ledge and catching not only tons of pollock, but pollock up to 20, 25 pounds. And the guys have been saying it's the best they've seen in years. And I was hoping to get a little piece of that myself. I did go out on the American Classic, and it was like the one day that the pollock didn't show up. We caught some small pollock. We loaded up on Acadian redfish. So definitely had some, kind of a lemonade trip, but it was just still good to get out on the ocean in February. And
it was one of those trips though where it had been day after day after day of great reports. Matt Hefner got out on a boat, and he did really well, caught some big fish. And so Jimmy, good on you to kind of organize this and get a whole bunch of people from the office to go. We had a pretty good group. I had to stay back. It was a very cold day, and somebody had to stay back and get the magazine ready to go. So I did that. But yeah, you guys all went out there on a cold, crisp day, and it just didn't pan out.
But still, I'm happy I went. I love those trips. The winter headboat trips were always the way to get through these dark months. And back, 20 years ago, it was cod. You'd go out after them, and you would fish for cod. Cod, the season in the Gulf of Maine is closed this time of year. You still can go catch them out of Rhode Island, of Block Island, the George's Bank cod stock. But it's something everybody should do in the middle of winter. If you've got cabin fever, hop on a head boat. A lot of them have heated rails. Some of them have rails that are so hot that you can't let your line touch them or it'll melt through. But if always find a boat with heated rails. It's a great. Always enjoy that. Your hands get super cold. Just put them on the rail while you're waiting for a bite. I love those winter cod trips, and it's a different crew you run into. You see the real. It's the real diehards that are on those boats.
Yep.
But it's a lot of fun. You've got the tog trips that'll run through February in New Jersey, but then that shuts down for the month of March. You're down back to Ling and stuff. But it was good to see that fishery come back a little bit and give us an option in northern New England for a winter head boat trip.
So what's your next bit of fishing you're going to do? Are you going to try and get out this weekend?
Probably trout fishing this weekend. My wings have been a little clipped lately. I don't. So my wife just had a baby. The baby right now is less than 2 weeks old. So I'm around the home front looking at you guys.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Being a dad this weekend. How about you, Cheech? You being a dad this weekend?
I am. I'm hoping to take my kids up to Maine and do some ice fishing, which I got a preview on FaceTime from Captain Robbie Taylor, who will be a guest again on the podcast in the not too distant future, and we can kind of give you a rundown of how that went. If it all goes well, there's some kids spiking fevers. There's a wife that doesn't feel so good. I have no idea what I'm going to.
How do you think this trip's going to go for Cheech? Maybe leave it in the comments.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm hoping it still happens. And he FaceTimed me yesterday. We were on for about 15 minutes. I watched him catch 5 smallies in that 3-pound range, 3.5-pound range. And he at one point he made the comment of it's run and gun smallie fishing. He's got holes drilled, in a big area, and he's got Mega Live imaging that he's dropping through the ice, and essentially it's forward-facing sonar, like 360 degrees, and you see the fish, you present a bait above them, they come up, you watch them nail it, and you're tight, and then next thing you know, that hole goes quiet, and he's like, oh, there's a wolf pack 50 feet in this direction. He picks up his case and his ice rod and runs to the hole closest to that, and he's tight over there. So it looks like it's super high energy, super fun. I really hope that goes the way he had like a 40, 50, 60 fish day yesterday. So that seems like a lot of fun. And I love smallies, so I'm in.
I love when Cheech gets his hopes up really high.
You were gearing up for this is me on the Pollock trip. This is what you're setting up for, where it's incredible fishing, incredible numbers, and you're going to go be catching perch and
the highest of highs, the lowest of lows. I will probably fall through the ice and end up in the hospital and be like, "Wow, this didn't go as I thought."
You sound like an Eagles fan in Week 10. Sorry, Jimmy.
Well, or Bills fan when.
Okay.
Buzzards Bay Yacht Sales knows that a great boat dealer is as important as a great boat. Why? Because new or used, you're buying a boat with 100 different systems and components that need tuning, training, troubleshooting, and sometimes repair. While most boat dealers are your best friend only until the sale is closed, Buzzards Bay Yacht Sales has developed a bulletproof reputation for building long-term relationships with their customers. Before, during, and most importantly, after the sale. Go ahead, ask around. We challenge you to find anyone who has anything but great things to say about Tom O'Toole and his team. With 6 locations from Freeport, Maine to Jupiter, Florida, including Marblehead, Massachusetts, and 3 offices on Cape Cod, Buzzards Bay Yacht Sales is committed to providing the best possible product, customer service, and support for both recreational boaters and passionate sport fishermen. It's true, who you buy from is as important as what you buy. Visit buzzardsbayyacht.com today.
So, Kevin, your winter, you do less of the fishing and more of the fly tying and prepping. What have you been filling your fly box with this month? I know you just went to a big event with the Saltwater Edge, met some of the...
Yeah, I went to Saltwater Edge, had an event called Stock the Box, which was really cool. I went there just to kind of check it out. I wish, and this is what I'm going to do. Next year, I'm going to go as a full-on participant. They have fly tyers there, some of the best in the Northeast and beyond who come and teach lessons, teach private classes, and you can sit and watch them tie flies. You can bring your own vise and take part. That's what I'm going to do next year. It was really cool to watch them and see. You know, I met Blaine Chocolate, who ties a fly called a series of flies called the Game Changer. They're jointed flies, kind of like if you picture the old Sebile Magic Swimmer, but in fly form. He was there. There were a lot of other great fly tires. So Ben Wally, who's been on our podcast as well.
Now, how did this differ from, let's say, the typical fly shows? This was more just fly tying, right?
This was in Newport. This was just fly tying. I bought some more fly tying material there because you can never have too much. But this was the focus, was to get a chance to meet some great fly tyers, to learn from them. I'm still very much an amateur when it comes to fly tying. I still have a lot to learn, but I'm really enjoying it. And so that's what I've been doing with my winter. I'm also trying to improve my fly casting, which is another big part of fly fishing. So I just booked some lessons with George Sylvester, who teaches fly casting on Cape Cod here. And he does fly casting weather dependent throughout the winter. Can take you out and do some of that. I don't know if we're going to go to a field or a body. You know, there's open water around as well, but figured now's the time, because I always say like, oh, I'm going to practice my casting, but as soon as the fish show up, you end up just fishing and not really practicing. So hoping to learn some good habits and get rid of some bad ones and become a better fly fisherman this year.
So what flies are you? What flies are you tying?
I enjoy tying like hollow flies. So that's a tactic that Bob Popovics came up with. I like tying with bucktail, which is what Bob Popovics kind of specialized in. And there's a lot of fly tyers now who focus on that. And so hollow flies is a way to use bucktail where you tie it kind of, it's hard to describe, sort of tie it backwards, and it creates a fly with a lot of bulk that looks like a big bait fish, but doesn't weigh a lot and doesn't have a lot of materials on it.
Yeah, it sheds water pretty easily on the cast, so it's not going to...
So every winter, my goal is I'm going to tie the flies that are going to help me catch the big striped bass that I see in my kayak that are feeding on bunker, pogies, menhaden. I see them, I throw flies at them, they chase the flies, and then they usually refuse. And every now and then, like, I get one to accept. But I'm like, every winter, I'm like, this is the fly that's going to fool those fish. So yeah, that's always my goal.
Any albie flies?
For albies, I'm going to start buying albie flies, because this past season, the albies were really picky, and my flies got rejected a lot. So yeah, there's some tyers who tie, the Albie Whore is the name of the fly. It uses hot glue. I've tried tying them myself, and I've just made a horrible mess, so I'm going to start buying those, definitely.
I've seen those in the water, and they look unbelievable. Basically, it's a few saddle hackles, and then you use a lot of kind of glue gun glue to shape the head, and then the tails behind. Is there any other materials in it?
Yeah, so Casey Allen, who has been a columnist writing our Buzzards Bay column in the magazine for quite a while, he was at the Stock the Box event, and he is really known for his Albie Whores for these flies. I watched him tie it. He says it's not even really a tie; it's more of like an assembly process, and so it's a body made out of hot glue. It's feathers glued to the side. It really is like the fly version of an epoxy jig, which everybody uses for albies. And I think I'm going to be putting in an order for them, because it's just one of those things that I'm like, you know what, the curve to learn how to tie these well enough myself. For the few shots at albies that you get, I want to know that the fly I have on is going to work. Now, 2 years ago, the albies were very stupid, and I was throwing I had Clousers and Deceivers, my schoolie striper flies, and they were eating those with abandon because they were feeding on peanut bunker. And I'm like, you know what, this albie fly thing isn't so hard. I'm awesome at this. This past year, the albies were eating a lot of little bay anchovies and stuff. They were very picky, and I got a lot of rejections and refusals. So
now, are you the type of fly tyer where you will say, okay, I'm going to knock out Clousers, and then you'll do a dozen straight? Or do you get, whenever I try to do it, I'm like, I know I will use a bunch of these pickerel flies, and then I'll do two, and I'm like, I'm bored with this. I want to do something else.
Yeah, no, I'm the sort of chaotic bored. My materials are a mess. I'm disorganized, and I sit down and I'm just kind of, something pops in my head. What am I going to tie right now? I'll pull up a YouTube video now and then and try and tie something new. But for me, tying flies, part of the fun of it is just tying something different. I know if I just stuck to one fly and tied it over and over again, that's how you get good at it. But sometimes it's more about just enjoying the time sitting there tying.
So with the Albie Whore, what why the hot glue as opposed to epoxy flies? Because that was the one that was always in. Those were the ones that I bought when I was fly fishing as a kid because I didn't want to make a mess with the epoxy. It was intimidating.
You can use epoxy. I think one of the main reasons that people use hot glue instead is hot glue is sort of how it was invented traditionally. The epoxy tends to be expensive.
Yeah.
So if you're using a lot of epoxy to make an albicore, I think you end up spending a lot of money on epoxy. And the hot glue, it works. It's one of those things.
And it's dirt cheap too. I mean,
Yeah, and it makes just a really tough fly that you can fish and get beat up with, and it works. I do use epoxy, UV epoxy on a lot of other flies. It makes great, for heads, for making surf candies, which is another type of fly. So I definitely go through a lot of epoxy as well. I was complaining to Jimmy at one point that I've been tying surf candies and I got like a terrible headache and a nosebleed and realizing like you can't just sit there and like inhale epoxy for that long in a closed
you're doing it in
area.
like a closed area and just you had epoxy everywhere. You go, man, I felt really woozy after doing a bunch of these surf candies. I don't know what was going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of warnings. You're really supposed to be careful with that stuff. So that's another thing I'm going to get better at this winter.
Huffing.
I really want to. I'd like a couple of the surf candies you tied at the end of that process. I'd like to see what they look like.
Do you buy your bucktail, or do you have any ends for real ones? I mean, you had a close call at getting some.
Yeah.
While you guys were filming on Nantucket, I saw some footage on that. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, we're not going to go into that story, but yeah, I do buy my bucktail. I don't harvest it from the side of the road. Chris Megan, though, he just got back from a hunting trip. He had shot a deer, and he was very proud. He's like, he brought it in a plastic bag. He's like, hey, I kept the bucktail for you, and he just tried to hand it over to me, and it was like
Not dried out yet.
he had just hacked it off the back of the deer.
It was bloody.
It was. I mean, there was like liquid in the bottom of a Ziploc bag. I'm like, have you even refrigerated this? This is just,
Yeah.
But yeah,
No, you gotta salt them real good.
Borax, right?
Yeah, I mean, I used to use salt because we used to do it, and you split them and then just literally pile salt so that you can't see any of the flesh, and it basically cures it, and then it hardens, and then you can kind of remove the hair, and it's clean and doesn't smell bad and stuff.
I use a lot of white bucktail, and it has become something that at certain times it's hard to find.
Yeah.
There's some different fly shops that I'll follow online that'll have bucktail drops, and they'll announce that they just got some new bucktail in. So I've ordered bucktail from Musky Fool out in the Midwest, from All Points Fly up in Maine. They get this beautiful white Maine bucktail that I like, and when it's available, I'll buy it. And yeah, it's one of those things. It's really fun to kind of limit yourself to a natural material. There's so many artificial materials, and you can really get artistic and explore. It's kind of fun to limit yourself to be like, I'm just going to use bucktail. It has this natural variation, this natural taper. Somehow feels more, I don't know, more in touch with this idea of tying a fly out of natural materials to catch a fish. I'm no purist, but it's fun.
On some rivers, Atlantic salmon rivers up in Maine, not Maine, Canada, you can only use natural material flies. And no weights or anything on the hook. That's why you see some Atlantic salmon flies have the double hooks. That's allowed because it's extra weight to help it get down. But
I didn't know that.
That's fascinating, Jimmy.
I didn't know that was. I always thought it was weird. So why have two hooks on a fly?
that's for the
learn
extra
something
weight.
every
It gets
day.
around the no foreign materials on the hook.
So outside of fooling those big stripers that are feeding on bunker, you got any other fly goals for the upcoming fishing season?
I always tie a bunch of pike flies. I do an annual trip up to Canada to do some pike fly fishing. Yeah, and going to Reindeer Lake this July, and pretty excited for that. So I'm going to tie up some big flies for that as well.
Is that all pike?
That's a pike and walleye lake. Has some lake trout too, but we're going to be there, like I said, right around July 4th, I think. So it should be a really good time of year for pike. Weeds just starting to come up when you're that far north. Pike's still in relatively shallow. So doing some of that.
Have you ever caught a muskie on the fly?
I never caught a muskie on the fly. I don't know that I've ever caught a muskie. So
Okay.
yeah, that's another goal. I like pike. They're a lot. It's like a muskie, but a lot more cooperative.
I lucked into my biggest pike ever. I've only caught two. One of them was up in Buffalo Harbor, right near your hometown where you grew up. When I was fishing jerk baits for smallies from a kayak, and I was like, cool, I finally checked that off, but it was like the smallest pike you could imagine. And then I happened to be heading up to a wedding in Vermont, and we had a chance to kind of extend the trip a little bit. My wife and I get a little break from the Rugrats, and we grabbed a bed and breakfast, which was conveniently chosen by yours truly, right on the banks of or right nearby the Connecticut River. So I did the whole, hey, we had breakfast at the bed and breakfast. Why don't we go for a hike? Which is kind of an odd request from a fat guy that doesn't really hike much. And I said, hey, mind if we kind of pull down near the boat ramp here and I take a few casts? And my wife was relaxed and chill, and she goes, yeah, no problem. And I'm like, all right, this buys me at least a half hour, an hour. And, she was hanging out in the truck, and then she ended up going for a walk. My second cast.
She took her hike alone?
Yeah, exactly. My second cast, she's still in the truck. My second cast, I stuck a really nice fish. I kind of expected to kind of come across some smallies. I knew there was a chance at a pike. And I was throwing a World Minnow jerkbait. Second cast, real light, like Bass X St. Croix setup, and I think maybe 15-pound leader, and I'm like, this thing, I feel some weight here, and I get the thing in, and I'm like, oh man, it was a really big pike for just stumbling into it, and I'm literally like calling her, like, hey, come down, take some pictures. She was in the truck, she came down, she was like, that thing's massive. I was like, look at the thing's teeth. It was awesome. So pike are very, very cool.
Cool fish, and I travel to go catch them, but I am seeing more and more pike fishing happening in the Northeast. It seems to be getting more popular.
Have you thought about trying like the Housatonic?
Oh, absolutely. I'm seeing, as I see more of that, it's like I've got to get out and do that around here this year.
Have you put any thought into kind of chasing down some of the local rumors about Cape pike?
I've actually chased some of those rumors. I know that there is a lake here, Waquaket, I believe.
Yeah.
That has pike in it. I don't know how many are left in there because at this point they'd have to be naturally spawned.
You get conflicting reports on how many are in there. If you talk to the guys who wait for a cold winter to ice fish for them, it's a true unicorn. You catch them. There's hardly any of them. You talk to the guys that do the bass tournaments in there, and they act like it's overrun with pike.
Yeah,
something that tournament bass guys hate is pickerel and pike.
Yeah,
they eat up time. They literally eat lures.
So I was fishing with a guy that fishes all the local tournaments, Kyle Jaget, and that whole topic came up, and it was like, hey, you want to go do that? And I'm like, absolutely. And I said, I'll only do it if Kevin Gould's involved, because I know from experience that he's one of the few that have that somewhat as much dialed in as I guess you could. And that might be happening. So I don't know, maybe we'll put a little contingent together when all the conditions align. You launch your kayak, and we'll get a couple boats launched, and Jimmy come with us and, cover some water and see if we can get that done. That'd be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I'm into it.
I'm almost more into driving like the 2 hours it would take to get to a water that's loaded
that
with
we
pike.
know is loaded with them. Yeah,
we can do that
the
too, Jim.
Housatonic, the Connecticut,
not one or the
those
other.
areas, you're starting to see a lot of great pike fishing out there, and some surprisingly big pike. And there's, pike spawn early. They spawn right after ice out for the most part. The biggest ones are the female pike, are the bigger ones. You don't want to necessarily target them when they're full of eggs, but that's, when you see them go up shallow and they become available. So it might be interesting to get up there, maybe just post spawn, and do some of that pike fishing.
So I know that the pike are one of your very favorite fish to catch. Why? What do you like so much about them? Besides the fact that, compared to the muskie, you said they're a little bit more approachable than muskie. But what beyond that has attracted you to pike?
Part of it is just that was in childhood, growing up, that was a very cool fish to target. It was the fish that, you'd fish shiners for bass, and then a pike would come along and it would just be surprising cool. They had teeth, they were badass fish and all that. So as an adult though, chasing pike, I love them because they're aggressive, because they get so big. The fact that a lot of the fishing I do for them, pike have this habit of following. And so it's often very visual, even if you don't see the fish you're casting to, but at some point during the retrieve, you see the fish suddenly behind your lure. That's kind of, to me, like the pinnacle, especially with fly fishing. You're watching your fly come back to the boat, and all of a sudden this big pike comes up behind it. Sometimes you see the fish strike, and it's very sudden, and then a lot of times you see them follow, and it's, what do I do? How do I change the retrieve? Do I need to do a figure eight? The other thing pike tend to do is, follow sometimes deeper. You don't even see them, and you get the lure to the side of the boat. You're about to lift it out, and that's when they strike. So there's often that. I've been fishing with my dad once, and I watched his lure at the side of the boat. One of the biggest pike he ever caught. I think it was around 45 inches. He was going to lift the lure out, and the pike, comes out of the water. It shocks you. You scream. Throws water everywhere. Grabs the lure, and
that's awesome.
Yeah,
they're cool fish.
Yeah, they're cool fish. They're chaotic. It's something I love about them. I've seen them eat baby ducks off the surface of the water. I mean, you don't get cooler than that.
You've seen that in person?
I've seen that in person.
That's wild.
It's a little sad. Mother duck was not happy.
I have witnessed that that fate of a family of ducklings by fishing the same pond like over and over again, usually on lunch break or something. It's like, oh, there's 10 baby ducklings. Next day it's like, oh, there's only 8. And then there's 6. And it's no surprise that some, bait makers make duckling lures that probably fish really well in the spring for largemouth bass and big pickerel and stuff. So shout out to the baby ducklings that have passed.
That feels like a hard stop for the podcast. I don't know where to go on that.